Hey gang, we are approaching a very small town here just south of Joliet in Illinois called Wilmington. And we've got a really interesting story here. We're going to be going back to the Civil War and a man that sustained an unbelievable injury and survived. But first, as we approach, we come into town, we got to say hi to the Gemini Giant. Look at that. Don't you love it? Kind of looks like our friend, what's that? Buzz Lightyear. That's the guy I was trying to figure out. Anyway, we'll see you at the cemetery. Okay, we are approaching the cemetery here. Straight ahead. It's called Oakwood. Why is it that half the cemeteries I go to, half the cemeteries are either Oak Hill or Oakwood? Is it just me? But anyway, we're in. We are standing at the very old part of this cemetery. When we first came in, that was actually the newer section. And as we snaked our way in, I crossed a little bridge to get here. Absolutely mesmerizing. Wait till you see this walk we're going to go on. The cemetery goes back to the early to mid 1800s and is just breathtaking. I want to thank Terry Ray Plinus for suggesting this story. It's about a year ago. I've been wanting to come here. It's a couple-hour drive. But actually where we're standing here, right in this corner of the cemetery, there used to be a small French fort. And down the hill, if you will see here, as it opens up, there were all the Indians, as they were called in the time. Of course, we say First Nation, the tribe, the Potawatomi peoples. And they would seek protection from the fort and trade furs, and the fort would give them protection. A lot of amazing history here. So let's take a walk to, the man's name is Jacob Miller, and we're going to walk to his grave. It's a crazy story from the Civil War. How he survived, I will never know, but we'll walk to his grave, and I'm actually going to read to you in his own words a lot of the story that I was able to find through Terry forwarded me an article where he is quoted telling his story. So let's take a walk and let's just marvel at some of these monuments. It is a calm day. We are going to be in the Oaks. Now, of course, this is a deserved name, Oakwood. I was kind of joking on the way in here that, you know, so many cemeteries are named Oak Hill, Oakwood, Oak this, Oak that, but this definitely is, well, it has a lot of oak trees. So this was taken from the Daily News, Joliet here. And Joliet is just to the north of here. That's where we did the story of Emma OCHSNER, who was electrocuted. And also, of course, the very tragic story of David Stukel. Now, this was from an article of June 14th, 1911, and it was titled, "Jacob Miller, a War-Scarred Hero." And it says at one of the titles, "Braidwood veteran carried bullet in head for many years after the war." Now, Braidwood is just located about 5 miles southwest of here, so apparently he was from Braidwood or lived there. Fell piece by piece. Story of the veteran left on the field of battle as dead. Reviewed from his own biography. Receives $40 a month pension. One of the most remarkable hero survivors of the Civil War. His name, Jacob Miller, and since September 19th, 1863, he has lived with an open bullet wound in his forehead. For a number of years, the bullet remained in his head, but piece by piece it fell out till now. It is thought none of it remains in the wound. During the time it was in his head, it at times would produce a stupor, which sometimes would last 2 weeks. It usually being when he caught cold and produced more of a pressure on the brain. At other times, delirium would seize him, and he would imagine himself again on picket duty and would tramp back and forth on his beat, a stick on his shoulder for a musket, a pitiful object of sacrifice for freedom. As these pieces of lead gradually loosened and fell out, he regained his usual health and is now, at the age of 78 years, one of the most, if not the most, remarkable survivors of the Civil War. The harrowing experience undergone by Mr. Miller is so vividly felt by him, even at this late date, that it is seldom he can be persuaded to talk of it. But it is my privilege to record from his own handwriting, written for his family, the story of his miraculous escape from death at that memorable time under his signature. Now, this is the part that is told in his own words, which I am about to read. I, Jacob Miller, formerly a private in Company K-9th Indiana Volunteer Infantry, was wounded in the head near Brock Field at the Battle of Chickamauga, Georgia, on the morning of September 19, 1863. I was left for dead when my company fell back from that position. When I came to my senses sometime after, I found I was in the rear of the Confederate line. So not to become a prisoner, I made up my mind to make an effort to get around their line and back on my own side. I got up with the help of my gun as a staff, then went back some distance, then started a parallel with a line of battle. I suppose I was so covered with blood that those that I met did not notice that I was a Yank. At least our major, my former captain, did not recognize me when I met him passing to our own side. At last I got to the end of the Confederate line and went to our own side while a brigade of Confederates came up, and they came behind the line behind me. There were none of the Union forces found on that part of the field when I passed along. So I struck an old by road and followed it the best I could, as by this time my head was swelled so bad it shut my eyes, and I could see to get along only by raising the lid of my right eye and looking ahead, and then go on till I ran afoul of something, then would look again, and so on, till I came to the Lafayette Pike near the Kelly House and started towards the field hospital at the Springs. I at length got so badly exhausted I had to lie down on the side of the road. At last some bearers came along and put me on their stretcher, and they carried me to the hospital and laid me on the ground in a tent. A hospital nurse came and put a wet bandage over my wound and around my head and gave me a canteen of water. I don't know what time of day they examined my wound and decided to put me in the operating table. It was after dark sometime. The surgeons examined my wound, and they decided it was best not to operate on me, and they gave me more pain as they said I couldn't live very long. So the nurse took me back to the tent, and I slept some during the night. The next morning was a Sunday. The doctors came around to make a list of the wounded of their company and the regiments and said to all the wounded to Chattanooga that the ambulances would carry. They told me I was wounded too bad to be moved, and if the Army fell back, those that were left there could afterwards be exchanged. As I stated before, I made up my mind as long as I could drag one foot after the other, I would not allow myself to be taken prisoner. I got a nurse to fill my canteen again so I could make an effort in getting near safety, safe as possible. I got out of the tent without being noticed and got behind some wagons that stood near the open road till I was safely away, having to open my eye with my finger to take my bearings on the road. I went away from the boom of the cannon and the rattle of musketry. I worked my way along the road as best I could. At one time I got off to the side of the road and I bumped my head against a low-hanging limb. The shock toppled me over. I got up, I got my bearings again, and went on as long as I could, dragging a foot. Then I lay down beside the road to see if I could rest. I hadn't lain long till the ambulance train began to pass. The drivers, as they passed me, asked me if I was still alive, and then they would just pass on. At least one of the drivers asked if I was alive, and he said he would take me in, as one of his men had died back Oz, quote unquote Oz, and he had taken him out. Then it was all a blank to me. Monday the 21st, I came to myself and found I was in a long building in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I was lying with hundreds of other wounded on the floor, almost as thick as hogs in a stock car. Some were talking, some were groaning. I raised myself to a sitting position. I got my canteen, I wet my head, and while doing it, I heard a couple of soldiers who were from my company. They could not believe it was me, as they said I was left for dead on the field at the left of Brock Cabin. They came over to where I was and we visited together. Till then came an order for all the wounded that could walk to start across the river on a pontoon bridge to a hospital to be treated, ready to be taken to Nashville. I told the boys if they could lead me, I would walk that distance. I started out, but owing to our Army retreating the night before, we were then in and around the city wagon trains. Troops and artillery were crossing the river on that single pontoon bridge. We could not get across until almost sundown. When we arrived across and up on the bank, we luckily ran across our company teamster, who we stopped and we stayed with that night. He got us something to eat. After we ate some, by the way, the first I had tasted before daylight Saturday morning, the 19th, we lay down on a pile of blankets, each fixed under the wagon, and rested pretty well, as the teamster stayed awake till early morning to keep our wounds moist with cool water from a nearby spring. The next thing I remember, I was stripped and in a bathtub full of warm water in a hospital of Nashville. I do not know what the date was. In fact, I didn't pay much attention to the dates when I got in the boxcar at Bridgeport to start for Nashville. After some length of time, I was transferred to Louisville, Kentucky, and from there to Albany, Indiana. In all the hospitals I was in, I begged the surgeons to operate on my head, but they all refused. No one would do it. I suffered for 9 months, and then I got a furlough home to Logansport and got Doctors Fitch and Coleman to operate on my wound. They took out the musket ball. After a few days of the operation, I returned to the hospital at Madison and stayed there till the expiration of my enlistment, which was September 17th, 1864. 17 years after I was wounded, a buckshot dropped out of my wound, and 31 years later, 2 pieces of lead came out. Some ask how it is I can describe so minutely my getting wounded and getting off the battlefield after so many years. My answer is that I have an everyday reminder of it in my wound and constant pain in my head. I'm never free of it while I'm not asleep. The whole scene is imprinted on my brain as with a steel engraving. I haven't written this to complain of anyone being at fault for my misfortune and suffering all these years. And the government is good to me and gives me $40 a month pension. And we have arrived at his grave just as the wood chippers start their noisy work. And yes, we have been hurled back to the 21st century. We are back to this world. His grave is right behind this stone here. Jacob Miller. (1838 to 1927), and I think that says G-A-R. We have Marjorie Miller, who passed in 1913, no doubt his wife. She was born a year later than him. She died before him. So there it is. What a story. Can't believe it. Hats off to you, sir, and thank you for your service. A proud and faithful Union soldier. Rest in peace to the Millers.